Welcome back to Unpopular Opinions! This is where I express a viewpoint that pretty much runs contrary to what the average person is probably going to think about a certain subject matter. And this time I'm talking about a video game that, well, I kinda deeply love. And it's hard for me to say these kinds of things about something that I really care about, but I gotta get it off my chest, because there's so many misanthropes in this fandom, and it's time I smacked him down, so here goes. In case it's not already obvious, I completely fell in love with the game Undertale, and there's a lot to love about it. I love the characters, I love how deeply it draws you into the story, and I love the different branching paths. I love that you can take a cruel, sadistic, genocidal route and become, in essence, everything that you are meant to not stand for. And how the game will call you out on your cruelty and your disturbing whims of destroying everything, not because you really have to, but simply because they're just in your way. I love the way the characters work off each other. I love the charm and the sense of humor. The battle system is well done, and it's pretty easy to figure out the rules. Plus, there's a lot of great moments of intensity and some really disturbing stuff in the game, so there's a lot to like about it. A lot to like about Undertale. But there's something that keeps getting overlooked, and I have to bring this up. Much like with Five Nights at Freddy's, a lot of people are kind of overlooking the fact that the so-called villains of the story might not be nearly as bad as the people that we're meant to sympathize with. Who am I talking about? Well, let's consider the character of Frisk. What do they go through? In a word, hell! Throughout the entire story of Undertale, Frisk is almost impaled by spears, eviscerated by swords, sliced and diced and bitten and chewed. He's kicked and punched and slaughtered. He has swords and axes swung at him. He's almost fried or burned to death. He almost gets his head taken off by icy boomerangs and enormous ice mountains. There was one time he was swallowed by a god of hyperdeath. Thank you, Azrael. And of course, the stupid friendliness pellets. And that's if he took the pacifistic, neutral route and just didn't dodge everything that was thrown his way. If he goes the genocide route, then Sans will obliterate him with his gaster blasters. If he goes the neutral route and only kills a couple monsters, he'll still get called a demon. He'll still get insulted. And people like Undyne will say that, no, you didn't kill them in self-defense, you killed them because it was easy for you. Even if you only kill one monster by accident, or because you can't legitimately figure out what to do and you don't mean to, the game will still call you a monster for killing someone. Yeah. Frickin' hypocrites. All of them. And that's just focusing on what they do to Frisk. Or perhaps all of you have forgotten the 6 other human children that fell down into the underground. And make no mistake, they were children. Toby Fox confirmed this in an interview with the Escapist magazine. Not to mention, it makes absolutely no sense for a normal adult to have an apron and a frying pan, or a tutu and ballet shoes, or a ribbon or a toy knife as they're hiking up a mountain. And no normal human, no normal adult really, would have that kind of stuff hiking up a mountain. They were all children, and every single one of them gets killed by Asgore, by the monsters, and their souls get taken away. And yes, I say killed by Asgore because according to what Toby Fox said on Twitter, not to Asgore past Asgore. It's just like Undyne said. No human ever made it past Asgore. He pretty much has murdered 6 children by now and is gonna make Frisk the next one. Yeah, he's a child killer. And look, I get the idea that he is desperate, that he made the order to kill all humans that fell into the underground in a fit of rage after losing both his son and the human child that he adopted along with Toriel. I get that he's just desperate. I get that all the monsters are desperate, but that doesn't excuse them. And Asgore, Asgore is being nice about this. Even worse is Undyne herself, who has absolutely no problem with threatening to murder someone who she says is evidently young enough to be in kindergarten, as evidenced by her saying, "I'm not your kindergarten teacher," right before she launches more spears at you. So this woman is perfectly fine with impaling a child many, many times over, solely because of the twisted motivations of revenge and getting even with something that happened aeons ago. How is that even remotely fair? I'm Catholic, and I'm aware that my people were not treated very well in Europe. But you know what? I don't want to nuke France just because of what the Huguenots did. And by the way, I also don't agree with the whole, dispute over the Holy Land, that it's okay to punish people because of the sins of your fathers. It's stupid, it's selfish, it's petty, and it's pathetic. Forgiveness takes a whole lot more effort than just holding on to a grudge, but it's more worth it and it shows more moral integrity. And moral integrity is something that a lot of the monsters don't have. And I'm not just talking about Undyne and Asgore. Oh no. Because need I remind you, pretty much every single other monster you meet tries to fight you and or kill you, or they are perfectly fine, or as they put it, so hyped for the destruction of humanity. And I know what some of you are going to say, but what about the war of humans and monsters? Doesn't it say that humans attacked out of nowhere, and that it was a massacre? That they attacked the monsters for no good reason? Well, there is a good reason. This reason. An illustration of a strange creature. Right after talking about what would happen if a monster got hold of human souls. The monster's own history implies that if a monster got hold of 7 human souls, they'd gain godlike power. How would they know this? Well, there's really only one reasonable explanation. A monster got hold of 7 human souls and gained godly power. And humans found out about it. And unlike modern humans that might have more leeway towards monsters, that might view them as an endangered species that needs protecting, or a minority group in need of civil rights that need protecting, ancient humans would not be nearly so tolerant when facing a creature that can not only freely do magic when most people can't, but they can steal your soul and take it from you and then use that to basically become God. That's scary shit, dude! I wouldn't want my soul ripped from me. Do you have any idea how terrifying that idea is to anyone who is even remotely spiritual? How disturbing that is? That not only do souls exist, but yeah, these are these creatures who can essentially... There is nothing to stop them from walking into a bank vault and killing everybody in it with their magic and taking their souls. What is a normal human who isn't armed going to do if they met a monster that wanted to hurt them? Because pretty much every single monster down in the underground hates humans and wants to kill them. The only way to hurt a monster is if you have a weapon and you have killing intent. And if a 10-foot tall fish woman with magic spears and a suit of armor is standing over you, you're not going to have killing intent. You're going to wet your pants and cry. You are going to scream. You are going to try to run. You're not going to think to fight back. And even if you could think to fight back, most people don't carry knives or swords or clubs or guns around. So an average everyday human isn't going to stand a chance against a monster. Monsters inherently have huge advantages over humanity. And you might say that, well, in the game's world, didn't they seal the monsters away with a magic spell? Yes, aeons ago, millennia ago, and now things like monsters and magic are legends. That's what Mount Ebott is. Everything regarding the monsters has passed into legend, meaning that nobody really believes in that stuff anymore, and ipso facto, nobody can really do it. But monsters can. And monsters do. They try to kill you, a child, and take your soul. Not just Undyne, not just the Royal Guard, not just Asgore, but let's also throw in Mettaton, who is perfectly happy with hiring monsters to kill a child just so he can steal their soul, cross the barrier, and become a star. You can't even really claim that his motivation is to try and help people, because as flawed as Asgore and Undyne are, at least their goals are somewhat understandable and somewhat noble, because they feel what they're doing is avenging their people or bringing their people back onto the surface after years and centuries of suffering. It's horrible, but at least it's understandable. Mettaton just wants fame and fortune. It's so selfish. And he has no problem with killing a child and stealing its soul to do that. That's pretty despicable stuff. Oh, but that is nothing compared to what I have to say about a certain tubby skeleton. Sans. This lazy coward is perfectly fine sitting back, watching as you mow your way through monster after monster until you get to the Judgment Hall just before Asgore. He doesn't do a thing. And the only reason he hasn't killed you, an innocent child, or perhaps even a non-innocent child if you actually have been murdering people left and right, the only reason he's held back at all and hasn't turned you into a greasy stain in the snow is because he made a promise to Toriel. And he freely admits that if it wasn't for that promise that he made, he would have murdered Frisk on the spot. So even if you've played the game as a complete pacifist, even if you've been nothing but nice to every single monster, if you've jumped through all the hoops, befriended every single one when all they had to do was just not attack you, even if you've done all of that, Sans freely admits that if not for the promise that he had made to Toriel, he would have murdered a child. This guy is a pretty big coward. A lazy, disgusting coward. And yeah, every single monster you meet like over 100 monsters on your way to Asgore, and all of them try to kill you. They throw icy boomerangs at you. They throw huge chunks of ice at you, and fireballs, and bombs. And you're what? You're not even in middle school from the looks of it. You look like a rugrat. And yet you're supposed to jump through all these hoops, compliment them or hug them or tell them to be honest with their feelings about the guy they've been working alongside with for so long. You have to do all of this, just to get them to not kill you. And all they have to do is just not try to kill a child. All they have to do is literally nothing. They have to do literally nothing, and yet you have to do everything. The entire burden of responsibility is placed upon a child, while the monsters get a free pass because, oh, they're desperate, and, humanity! It's disgusting. I cannot believe what hypocrites, these monsters are, going on and on and on about how awful humanity is and how unfairly they were treated. Well, you know what? Humanity was afraid you'd turn into a bunch of soul-stealing monsters, hordes hunting down humans. And what have you turned into? A bunch of soul-stealing hordes trying to hunt down a human to take their soul away from them. You became the very thing humans were afraid of. This entire game, the monsters are proving that humanity was right to be afraid of them and to distrust them. They're proving everything that the humans were afraid of them. And the game never seems to realize this. The game never seems to realize how blatantly hypocritical they all are. Never! And you might think, well, not all of the monsters try to kill you. Unfortunately, all the monsters do try to fight you. Even Toriel can accidentally kill you, and she deserves a bit of blame herself because, yes, you could argue that it's not her fault her husband chose to kill the children. And it's implied that she honestly tried to keep the children that fell down into the underground with her for as long as she could, and because of that, and because she got so attached to them, that is why she so desperately tries to fight you. But in her own way, she's also kind of cowardly because she can't bring herself to just leave the ruins and try to confront Asgore, or to try and take power for herself and to institute new policies or anything like that. So you could argue that she deserves at least some hint of blame for what happens. I'm not saying she deserves all of it, or that she's a bad person. In fact, I don't think any of the monsters are genuinely bad people, but I do believe in justice, and I believe in holding people accountable and responsible for the bad things that they do. These monsters have made terrible mistakes. They have done terrible things, but they're not the ones who, it seems, have to own up to the wrongs they did, with the exception of Asgore, who gets called out for it by Toriel. No, the people that have to own up to it are humanity for making that choice all those years ago, even though they had very good reason for doing so, as proven every time you take a couple steps forward. The only exception? Papyrus. Yes, Papyrus. I love this guy. He's hilarious. He is so much fun. And out of all the monsters that fight you, Papyrus is the only one who actually seems to have a pretty strong moral code and sympathetic. You can understand what he wants. He wants to be popular and he wants to have friends. I can get that. And even when he fights you, he holds back against you. He doesn't actually kill you. He can't even accidentally kill you like Toriel. You just get knocked out and then he puts you in his shed. And even besides that, he's holding back against you, even when he's using his traps on you. So essentially, this guy, who has every reason to want your soul just as much as anybody else, he's the nicest monster out of them all. He might be the only morally good, morally pure monster out of the bunch. I mean, yes, sure, he's still attacking a child, but he's better than the others. And again, I remind you, if you so much as gain one level, or, for example, kill Undyne when you don't know how to get past her, or kill Toriel when you can't figure out how to get past her, which are very reasonable and understandable problems, the game still pretty much insults you. It still pretty much calls you a monster. Freaking hypocrites!